Hello guys, we are live for another session of Carnivore Team GB, session number 10 with myself, Phil Escott, Richard Smith, the Keto Pro, and also Ben Hunt. Hopefully everyone in the chat is doing great today, and just to let you know, I'm feeling much better for a lot of people that have been asking. But today we're going to be answering people's questions, as per usual, every Tuesday night at 7 PM UK time. If any of you guys wanted to say anything before we start this chat in the panel, just let me know and we can get on with it.
Only that it's your last chance to join the get your ticket for the War on Health this weekend, because we've got to send in final numbers for the catering tomorrow. So
and I'll drop a link below for that. No.
Yeah, brilliant. War on Health.
Cheers. Yeah, I'll copy and paste it onto my live stream chat as well. So for those of you who don't know, go on to the Big Fat Challenge, go onto the events page. It says what's coming up this year pretty much. I believe the guys may or may not have a discount code which is available, so it makes it much more affordable if that's currently something which you cannot do. So that's the link on the page right now.
GB Carnivore.
That's it, GB Carnivore.
Oh, and if anybody listening doesn't know Richard's story, have a look on my YouTube channel. I'll put the link up here to the episode on my podcast, and it was great. I got Richard to avoid the science. He was ever so upset about that. We'll do another one on that. But check out his story, because we got such amazing comments about it. You know, it's such a great episode. What a story, you bugger.
Thank you. Yeah, I struggled not to talk about the science, but yeah, I think in fact you've probably had a few pieces of information out of me there that I've never released on podcast. So yeah, quite a personal, in-depth podcast, I think, but thoroughly enjoyed.
Excellent. I'm honoured. And yeah, it was brilliant. Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Yeah, that's what people want to hear. You know, the story is important. It's all good putting out good information, but where does it all come from? And people can often find they resonate with you. I know all people in this chat right now, everyone in the panel has had some kind of mental or physical health issue of some kind. So we all have something to give to the community, in my opinion. So definitely worth checking out everyone else's videos, chats, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. All right, I'm going to quickly go through the chat now. I haven't hosted in 2 weeks. Apologies for the lack of attendance. The last week I wasn't very well at all. I'm feeling much better now, so excellent. Zbigniew has said hit the like button, which is essential on all of our channels. I believe it's currently being streamed to mine, Richard, and Phil's channels right now. So check that out if you haven't yet already. Hit like, of course. The Dutch giant Tom has attended. Excellent. Stay in the chat. Ask away all your questions that you do have. All your meatiest questions will be answered. Preferably the sooner the better. If you ask it 1 minute towards the end, you probably won't get good response. It's not like Richard and Stephen's Rumble sessions where they go on for an extra hour. I don't have the endurance for that, but they're certainly better at that than I am. So,
I've got a bit of a question.
Sure.
So I've talked a little bit about the current challenge that I'm doing, which is 90 days strict carnivore, no dairy, no tea, coffee, alcohol, anything like that. It's just meat, salt water, some fish. And I've been talking about it a little bit on my channel, but my main YouTube channel is chess boot camp. So I teach chess and play chess games and stuff like that. I've got 12,000 subs on there. And so I talk a little bit about it. And of course, you know, anytime you stir the pot, you get some scum rising to the top. And then I've had, you know, somebody say, I will never take diet advice from somebody who keeps chickens, for example. They were happy chickens until the fox ate them, but that's life. But then I've had somebody coming up saying, no, carbs are absolutely essential. Your brain prefers carbs. So my understanding of it is that, hey Stephen, that your brain will burn carbs preferentially, right? As in, it'll burn carbs if there's excess glucose or whatever in your system. But Phil, we talked about this briefly the other day, that it'll burn alcohol before sugar as well, won't it? And then what was the other one?
Well, lactate. But somebody else with the better science can go into that, I think.
Yeah. So it's quite interesting though to like differentiate actually what preferential means in that context. I was wondering if you guys had any views on that.
Yeah, well, I know myself, Stephen, and I believe Richard have also spoke about this before in different podcasts. We kind of say, well, the body doesn't want a load of glucose in the bloodstream at once. It's trying to clear it away as quickly as possible. So it's going to find a way to clear it. And that's why it happens to get rid of it so fast. So in a sense, yes, it is preferential or desired to be oxidized, burnt off the quickest. But that's just to prevent the oxidation that would happen otherwise. Now, when we take in fat, that transmutes into body fat or as an energy substrate, we have a massive abundance of stored energy on our body as body fat, which we can store it as. So glucose, especially when we've got high circulating blood glucose, and also full glycogen stores, whether that be skeletal, muscle, or also in the liver. When that's full, the spillover glycation through the blood, like I mentioned earlier, through the glucose, not ideal situation to be in. So it can lead to a lot of chronic excess inflammation. So that's kind of my take on it. But the body's always trying to, like I said, the point is the body's trying to clear away the most damaging things first. And I think that's always the case that in every situation, really. But then again, what you feed it is what it tends to burn. There's studies out there, I have a carnivorous or ketogenic diet. When I do this, I burn more fat. Well, yes, because that's what you're feeding your body. Your body gets used to doing that. It has the enzymatic reactions needed to do it in proportion to the food that you're taking in. Now, if I was a carnivorous athlete eating loads of sugar, I'll be oxidizing Skittles all day. That's just the truth. But obviously, we know one is essential nutrient, one absolutely isn't. One provides essential vitamins, one doesn't. So that's my take on it. But I'm interested to hear what the other guys have to say on it.
Me to jump in there. Yeah, I agree, but alcohol takes oxidative priority when it's in the body because it's a toxin. So the body is trying to excrete a toxin in order to save your life. And it's a similar case with excess sugar or glucose. Glucose is essential, but the body can create any glucose that it needs. This is the reason we have glycogen stores. It's to pull the excess glucose out of the blood in order to keep us alive, because this is how toxic glucose is. But it's the brain doesn't actually preference glucose. If it's offered ketones in the form of beta hydroxybutyrate, it will preference ketones, and over a period of a few days, it'll actually preference up to 70% of its energy from ketones. So, when people say the brain and the body preference, it's a fallacy. The brain, the body, and the heart preference beta hydroxybutyrate when it's available. But as Jonathan says, when the body is full of glucose, then it needs to get rid of that. So it's going to preference that energy first. And again, so on and so forth with the alcohol and the lactate. But it is a toxin. It's excess, glucose consumption leads to all sorts of issues which damage our body's ability to create our neurotransmitters and even our ability to perform methylation. And we can go deeper into that if there's no other questions a little bit later on. But it's glucose is a toxin. If the body needs a little bit, and it comes back to a point that Stephen's made several times as well, we look at certain things as being damaging. Like we look at cortisol as being, a demon, and an insulin. All of these things are essential. It's the balance. It's having that correct balance, as the point Stephen's made several times. These are all essential, but it's just this overstimulation of one and putting it out of kilter, which is causing the damage. All of these are necessary. All of these pathways, and even when, a few times we've mentioned things like the NRF2 pathway, which is that oxidative stress pathway, which is when overactivated leads to oxidative stress and various other conditions. But it's caused by things where we're told are antioxidants, but a little bit of that activation is beneficial. So it's that's my take.
Great, thanks.
Anybody else got anything to add?
No, brilliant. We'll get to the next question then. I think Richard summarised that very well. Perhaps we'll get time towards the end to talk about the stuff around methylation or the extra additional stuffs, which would be cool. Now we've got another question here. Some bodybuilding questions by Alex Fit, and a question by from Daryl Bodsworth, which is, what is the best exercise to get the back of the shoulders built so the shoulders look like cannonballs? Cheers. I'd definitely ask Richard or Stephen for that question. My delts are not that great, to be honest. So, Stephen, what's your take on like building your shoulders?
Well, I actually like, so whether I'm going to change this. What I used to like is different. So what I do like now is there's a machine for doing flies, and you can sit on it in reverse, and you can work your rear delts like that. I think that's actually quite cool. I used to sort of go on the edge of a bench and bend over and just do flies that way. Yeah, I think that's quite good. And strangely enough, I've been sort of experimenting because I've gone back to the gym after using the X3 bar for 2 years. And I quite like getting on the cable crossover machine, but facing it rather than doing, with it behind you to do your chest, and actually doing crossing over. So sort of like a converging. And that seems to hit them quite well, which I wasn't expecting. Again, it's the angle. Yeah, I'm going to apologise for being late, by the way. My dog Rupert I'm on my own today, and he knows this, and he's got me around his little finger, and I think he knows when this live stream's on, because literally a minute to 7 it's like, I'd like to play, and I'd also need a poo, and I need to have a wee. So I came in, I didn't even see that first question, so sorry I didn't answer that. But yes, rear delts, I think they're underestimated. So I always, pretty much every week, I will do something isolated for them now. So, but I'm sure Rich has got all the technical terms for those exercises I just demonstrated badly.
Hey, can I just jump in quickly, because I want some of you to pull me apart on this one. When I used to run a gym, first of all I used to do kind of isolation stuff and whatever, actually before I ran my own gym, but never in the time when I ran my own gym and trained a lot did I ever do an isolation exercise. It was always, I'd do bench press, I'd do shoulder press, and I'd do deadlifts and squats, and chins. That was it. And it was all I was interested in. It was just, I loved those lifts, those movements. I didn't like the fiddly ones. And I'm sure that when you've got a load of muscle, those fiddly ones are great for sort of toning or shaping some particular part of the body. But one thing I did get, because I got no pecs, they're shite. But one thing I did get was shoulders like cannonballs. And that was always the thing that grew the first. And is it not possible, really, to just do the bigger exercises so that, does it release more growth hormone? How does it work? But is it not better to just, maybe until you've attained a certain size, to just do the bigger exercises and just go, if you can shoulder press, like, I don't know, if you start at something like 60 kilos or something for 10, if you can do that, if you can get to 100 kilos for 10 or something, your shoulders are going to be a hell of a lot bigger, without any isolation. Am I blaspheming here? Off you go.
No, you're not blaspheming, because you definitely get big shoulders with pull-ups and compound movements that you just mentioned. Your overall body strength will improve, your grip strength will improve, and everything will improve with those compound movements, deadlifts, squats, pull-ups, push-ups, and everything like that, traditional. But I think when you get into bodybuilding, it starts to be aesthetics, and you look at things and you might want something that is naturally disproportionate but looks absolutely awesome. So what will happen, you've got a multi-pennant muscle in the shoulder. Well, that is a posh way of saying it does lots. And there's those 3 main delts, and the mid delt will pick up most of the slack for most of those exercises. The front delt, most people do some sort of front raiser. The rear delt, this is actually the problem with gyms, because there's mirrors and guys are idiots. They tend to look at that and go, right, that's what I'm going to work on. Their back doesn't get the work that it needs. So this is a thing that you'll see at a lot of bodybuilding competitions where it's at the lower level. The front looks absolutely awesome. They turn around, they do a lat spread, maybe, a couple of bits to sort of show everything pop, and you think nothing's popping much because they haven't done those isolation things. So I think the question implies sort of this rounding out of the shoulder, which I think you'll get some really good growth for most compound things, Phil. But I think we've got a bodybuilding couple sitting in here as well, and they're probably into like posing and having photos, and someone saying, yeah, your rear delts are letting you down, or your calves are letting you down, or something like that. And that's where you get into isolation, because it's proportionately, when you look at a bodybuilder, that's not what a normal person would look like doing all the compound moves, which I think is what Daryl's sort of after, really, just shaping something that, and then also some muscles just lag because you are dominant. You might be doing a shoulder press, and it's just the way you positioned yourself over years of doing the shoulder press. You might have the weight slightly forward, you might have your arms at 45 degrees or 90 degrees, depending on what you've been taught. And then you'll think, oh, there's a lot of development. Yeah, my shoulders look great at the front, give me a nice V shape. But when I turn to do a pose, they just disappear. And I think that's sort of the rationale for the isolation exercises. And like you mentioned biceps, like peaking your biceps is definitely something that an isolation exercise would really help, I think.
Richard, do you have any takes on that? I'm kind of in the middle between. Sorry, just quick say, I'm kind of in the middle between what Stephen said and what Phil said. So I'm kind of like, well, most people probably just need to do, I don't know, 6 to 10 compound-ish lifts. You'll get 90% of the results doing that in your whole body. Now, when you're getting a step on stage, like me, or Stephen in the past, or Richard, at some point you're going to say, oh, my rear delts aren't quite good enough, which is very common, like Stephen said. So that's the point you then think, okay, I'm going to add that in. So for me, what I quite like doing is some sort of chest-supported row with a wide grip. I find that quite effective. It will target some of the upper back muscles as well. I don't do a whole lot of reverse fly, movements with like the arc anymore. I find it just impinges my shoulder joint a little bit. I don't know why. I'm quite strict with my form, but I'm trying to get the most bang for my buck. So I'm doing like 5 to 7 sets total workout, 3 to 4 times a week, and working really, 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 really hard in each set. And that'll probably give you 90% of the results. But I'm keen to hear what Richard thinks as well.
Yeah, no, I agree with everybody. It's you need to put the work in. It's that base that you build on, and as Stephen says, it's big, bolder shoulders are more aesthetic. That was a big, weak area for me when I first started competing in bodybuilding. It became my strength in the end. I managed to add, better part of maybe 6 inches to my frame when I was pulling that sort of pose because of the way that I built the delts. It didn't look natural. It doesn't look normal, but we don't do it to look normal. We do it to look, abnormal or extraordinary. It's not something that I think we would have built naturally during our evolutionary period, but it's targeted exercises. I think once you've put the hard work in, will definitely round off the shoulder. And I'm a big fan of rear delt work. The thing is, when you are in this position or when you're doing that, the part on the side there isn't the side of the delts, it's actually the rear. So if I was to relax now, my rear delt is there. The second I put up, my rear delt is there. So if you're standing in the street doing this or doing that, it's the rear delt that's actually popping onto the side. It's not the side delt. So I used to concentrate a lot on rear delt work. I didn't concentrate specifically on front delts, but I did extensively on chest work, including incline bench. Now, incline is a fantastic builder for the front delt. So just by training bench was the base of most of my training, because the chest and the delts, and obviously back as well, with those 3 parts there, that's going to massively change your physique. And then the rest is diet. If you can get a narrow waist and build this up, you even being half the size, you're going to look bigger. It's all about that illusion, that X frame, or creating that V. When you're standing outside in your t-shirt and the sun's blazing, it is aesthetic, isn't it? I became stronger when I was training, but it was all about look. And that's what bodybuilding is. It's body sculpting, isn't it? It's creating that physique that you want to get. I've had to sacrifice most of that now, as you can see, since I've gravitated into running and cycling. But needs must. It's every goal, requires a different input. When your output changes, the input changes. My goal now is to be light and fast, and extra muscle on top is absolutely counterintuitive to running fast and riding a bike. But that's what I did for my delts. So 90%, as you say, is the work, isn't it? Put the work in, and the rest is all the icing on the cake. But I'm a big fan of rear delt work. Concentrate on the bench included, especially incline for the front delts. And I think the rest will all fall into place. But consistency is key. It's not something you can bash out for 6 months, not see results, and be disheartened. You know, I didn't. My delts were the weakest body part for better part of 4 years. And then 1 year when I just stripped down, they would just pop in and lump in and bump in, you know, and they just came from nowhere. So 4 or 5 years it took me to build mine to the point where I wasn't embarrassed of them, you know. So consistency is key.
Yeah, it's a good take on it. I think you mentioned some really good points there. Consistency is the absolute key for sure. We got a question now from my Niev, and it is: what do you gents think about temporary supplementation of deuterium depleted water for health benefits? Many thanks. This is definitely a 100% carnivore and beyond question, so maybe I'll go with Ben for now.
Yeah, it's great. It will probably extend your life if you live on deuterium depleted water. I was just looking up a tribe called the Hansa, or the Hansa people, who live in a valley in Pakistan, who live typically to 120 years and are having kids in their 60s. And one of the big things that Carnivore Aurelius shared, and he shared this on an email the other day, and I looked them up, and he listed a bunch of stuff. But I think the main thing that stands out for me is that they're having glacier water, which is naturally low in deuterium. The higher up in the world you go, the less deuterium you find, because it's heavy, I guess. I don't know. The downside of DDW is it's bloody expensive. So, and it gets really expensive when you get down, you know, to 60, 50 parts per million. So the poor man's version is to eat lard instead, because that's like 90, 95 parts per million. Anyway, it's just about the lowest deuterium food stuff that you can find, and it will also hydrate you as well. So if you're made of money, Zbigniew, then knock yourself out, get a load of deuterium depleted water. Or if you've got a really virulent cancer, then, you know, absolutely. But as a supplement, I think it's probably overpriced for the value.
For sure, yeah. I'd agree with everything that Ben said there, for sure. Don't know if you other guys have a take on it at all.
Not a take, but I've got a question for Ben. You know, if this deuterium depleted water is so beneficial, was there less deuterium in water through our evolutionary period? Has it been? Yeah. Okay. So
apparently the deuterium, the background kind of deuterium levels are growing, but I haven't got any numbers on it.
And it's caused by
about the Antarctic guys as well, haven't you?
Well, it's about 155 parts per million, isn't it? Regularly now, and sometimes, you know, if you Antarctica, there are stories of people going on sort of scientific expeditions and eating the same old crap in the sort of cafeteria, whatever they have there, the marquee that they set up and cook, and yet their ailments are reversing because they're drinking really low deuterium water, which is in the Antarctic, and glacial stuff. But I think, you know, Ben mentioned the lard thing, and yes, but any really good animal fats will cause the cells to produce their own deuterium depleted water. And I'd agree with Ben. I'd never say for people to use it unless they've got some really serious cancer thing. But I don't think it's necessary if you if you're eating a high fat, good animal based diet, because then you generally drink less anyway, so you're not filling yourself up with deuterium from the water. So it's lard is actually a health food. Well, yeah, if the pig's eating what it's supposed to eat, it is the lowest deuterium of anything. But tallow is very good too. But the thing is that the body can deplete deuterium. And if you're not doing the things that stop the body depleting deuterium, like getting bathed in blue light, EMFs, whatever, no grounding, if you're not getting any sun particularly, that kind of thing, then the body can hold on to deuterium. It's not a bad thing. It's good in certain parts of the body and at certain times of life. You know, have a listen to Sarah Pugh on that one. She demystifies it very well. I've got an interview on my Red Pill Buddhas podcast as well with Gabor Shomlai. At the beginning of it, Graham Norbury, friend of ours, explains it all very simply before Gabor dives into all the science that baffles everybody. But so the body can deplete it perfectly well, particularly if it comes in from carbohydrates like nature intended. But when we interviewed Laszlo Boros, he said that he just really proved that when it comes in via seed oils, you can't get rid of it. You've got to really go for it seriously and do a dry fast or something and really get that apoptosis going on. Because otherwise, because the cells are done, then they can't get rid of it. It's probably one of the reasons why seed oils are so carcinogenic that nobody has spotted. So yeah, on many levels, those things are horrific. But if you're eating a high-fat diet, there's no need to have the expense of deuterium depleted water. You shouldn't be drinking that much water either. Laszlo used to do courses called Washing Away Your Health. All this nonsense about how you've got to drink liters and liters of water a day. There are many levels on which that's not a good idea, but one of them is that you're filling yourself up with deuterium. So yeah, I wouldn't bother unless you're seriously sick or have a big bank balance, like Ben says.
Yeah, I mean, Richard and I have spoken a little bit about this before, like our differences in water consumption. He drinks like 3 or 4 times more than I do, but he also exercises a lot more than I do. He's doing hours upon hours on a treadmill. You know, he's physically active in his job, sort of working in the shop, things like that. So he's standing around a lot doing stuff. I'm very sedentary, other than the fact I go to the gym for about 40 minutes, 3 or 4 times a week. So I don't need to deplete so much deuterium, whereas Rich is able to do that better than I am. Other than that, I don't know. I don't drink a lot of water. I drink 2 liters most days. When I was experimenting with like the 80-20 fad that came by, I was having about 380 grams of fat at one point, and I was drinking about 1 liter of water a day. The water that I do drink is always Evian or maybe Buxton sometimes if I'm feeling a bit tight and cheap. But that's a lower deuterium or better quality water, in my opinion. But so, you know, it's an extra thing. You don't have to do it. Like Phil said, there's certain biohacks that you can do to sort of prevent you know, having to spend all this money on extra stuff, you know.
Also, a small consideration maybe, but definitely one, that Jack Cruz says it doesn't really matter if you're in that state and getting low deuterium water is the priority, but it does pretty much all come in plastic bottles. You know, when you order it, it would be very difficult to ship and expensive in glass bottles. But I'm sort of pretty aware of the plastic anyway. I don't like the idea. Where if you leave a bottle of water in a hot car and then you taste it, it's like, you know, it's in there. You know, it's in there. Yeah,
for sure. You know, it's a good question. It brings about a good topic of discussion. The next question is from Beef with Nick. And is it safe to drop fat content to like 60% or so of my intake to drop body fat? Or would that have the opposite effect? I'm assuming he's talking about by caloric value. So that probably equate to something like 100 protein, 90 fat, roughly, something like that. Personally, you can do it. It might be short-lived. You probably run out of energy pretty quick. You probably drop body fat quite quickly, but your appetite will eventually increase to make up for that. Your body always wants to maintain homeostasis. If I was to do it and I was to go lower, the lowest I got to was about, I believe it's 48% fat in terms of caloric value in my pre-contest diet. And I felt just about okay, you know, really just about okay. But some people can probably go a bit lower. But if I'd go lower than, say, 60% like I did, I would probably do it in a phasical fashion. So maybe you pick 1 or 2 days per week, perhaps on a weekend when you're, you know, doing something else, maybe not training or something. And that'd be the days where I decrease the fat quite a lot. And I know Rich is a bit of a fan of sort of cycling macronutrient intakes as well. So.
Yeah, I used to, if I want to drop weight incredibly quickly, I will gravitate to lean cuts for a few days and look specifically for foods that contain 20 to 30% fat. So I will little to no fat, and I'm talking things like tuna, bassa fish. If I do go for steak, it's like a super lean fry-in steak, but I'm talking super, super, super low fat. We shouldn't go prolonged periods. Our bodies need fat. Yes, we can assimilate fat from the body, but if you're already lean, there's still a lot to assimilate, but 3/4 of the energy value in the body need to come from fat sources. So it's either going to come from the body or dietary fat, and the proper function of hormones and all these other things in the body are essentially relying on fat, whether that comes from body or diet. But fat is important. You can't go prolonged periods of time without fat. So if you are going to do it, people fast for 2 or 3 days without eating anything at all, and that's fantastic. If you want to do that. I used to sort of implement that with high protein and super low fat content in order to strip very, very quickly. But I would periodically put in fat refeeds. So every 2 or 3 days while cutting, I would go back and have a super high fat day just to keep everything ticking over. Is it healthy? It depends on what your goal is and depends on where you are physically. Now before you do it, for me, when I was competing, it was for a goal. So I did it to achieve something. It had a purpose to it. I implement it now. If I'm competing in a duathlon, I typically drop 5 to 6K within a week. And it's not just body fat, in the normal sense that we know. It's fat stored in the muscle as well, but it's also fluid, retention caused by inflammation of excess training. So the week before an event, you'll tend to taper down and train less. So all the inflammation goes away. So you're not just stripping, the better part of a stone of fat. There's a lot of other contributing factors going on there. But gravitating to lean cuts for a few days is a fantastic way for stripping. But as you say, Jonathan, it's, doing that long term isn't sustainable. The body needs fat. And if you are going to do it, I think it's important to cycle it.
And can I just say, it also maybe shouldn't be your first port of call. If you've got dairy in your diary, maybe drop that. Where is your fat coming from? Is it coming from eggs? Is it coming from cheese? You see, so the percentage thing is a good sort of starting point, but I would definitely look at your fat sources as well. But I think it's something like, does it have the opposite effect? No, it doesn't originally. When you first do it, it's not going to have the opposite effect. But I think most people who drop their fat content are never doing it long term, really. And if you do it long term, your body will start to tell you when it's not working anymore, because you will see your body composition not to your liking. So then you're going to go back through a period of adapting to the higher amount of fat. So it could be something that you don't really want to get into. But I think Rich summed it up there. You could fast for 3 days. You could drop fat for 3 days down to 60%, see what happens, and you'll probably be pleased with the result. I don't think you'll have any detrimental effects long term, but just like a 3-day 60% fat thing. And I think you're right, Jonathan, that possibly would be looking at calories. Most people, when they talk sort of 60-40 or something like that, they tend to be talking about calories rather than weight. I'd go to weight of food, to be honest. I would actually look at mass and start getting into that. But that's for another. That's not been asked, so we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, I've got a whole playlist on how to track your nutrition intake on my YouTube channel, and that's your best bet to work out carnivore diet macros, I think, in a short amount of videos as possible. So check that out if you haven't yet already. We won't go into it here because it will take a month to sort of explain all the ins and outs. But the next question is right up Stephen's alley, I think. Now, I did actually speak to this gentleman who's asked a question. I did make recommendations myself, which I'm sure you'll make the exact same recommendations as I did already. But the question is, what would you recommend to someone who struggles to absorb fats? I know someone who has a hard time digesting fats, such as streaky bacon and fatty steaks, especially grass-fed, which makes it difficult for him to stick to carnivore. Is there a way he can support absorption, for example, ox bile, betaine hydrochloride, so he can stick to a carnivore diet?
Can I be controversial here a bit and say that, this woo-woo thing that everybody says doesn't work, liver flushing, it actually really does. And it can definitely increase your ability to digest fats. You know, having been, you know, an idiot and done over 60 of them now over the years, not really anymore, because once you're on a carnivore diet and stabilized on it, you don't need it. But I don't know exactly what it does, but it does really seem to help with that once the liver's cleared. And it can sometimes, if you're lucky, also get rid of gallstones. But I think, you know, betaine, HCl, and ox bile, I'd be interested to hear what the guys think. But I'm sort of the opinion that unless you really need to, it's very much better not to supplement with something that the body produces itself too much, like melatonin, that kind of thing. And I would say that bile is kind of the same. I've heard Anthony say about it that it basically pushes your body past its natural limit of how much fat it wants to digest at the time. I think, you know, clearing out the liver, which will happen anyway in time on carnivore, but if you want to speed it up a bit, you can try the old woo-woo liver flushing. And I sort of almost to cringe and try and hide under my desk saying that, because I know everybody thinks it's absolutely barking mad. I've heard Sean really take the piss out of it from time to time. But, you know, having seen it work so many times, it's probably one of the only 1,000 things that I did when vegan that I think is actually useful. But yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think about supplementing with something that the body actually produces?
Well, can I ask you, Phil, have you ever done the liver flush as a carnivore?
Yes.
Yeah. And did you get the same results?
Well, I didn't really need the same result, but I did it because I tell you why I did it, actually, full disclosure. I did it because over the past few years during lockdown, I've probably necked far too much brandy. And I thought every now and again, maybe I should give that liver a bit of a clean out. Whether it's doing it or not, I don't know. But it does seem to have a good effect. I don't do it now. I haven't done it for ages. It's said to you know, once you've done it once a month for a certain amount of time, you know, a good 10 or 12 flushes, to do to just do it at change of seasons or whatever. But that's just opinions. I don't know. I would say, you know, if somebody has serious skin issues that they can't exactly tie into oxalates or something else, you know, or difficulty digesting fats, it is worth a go. And to me, it's the only use I have for plant matter, because it involves olive oil and grapefruit juice, you know. But it's just one big glug, and I think it's just, you know, if people are skeptical, just give it a go. You never know. Can be useful.
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer the guy's question, Carnivorous Beasts question, and just say I've been saying that about supplements can be pushing your bodies beyond its limits, but for some people it's a good bridge. I've been saying that for years, actually. So it's nice to know that Chafee says something similar to that. The questioner said, should I take bile or HCl? So stomach acid improvement and also bile improvement. That's what you're after. You could actually look at smaller meals with a bit more frequency and not supplement. See how that goes. That's the first thing I would do. And I'm not saying those two supplements don't work, because there'll be people watching this who have tried those supplements and found them brilliant. But I think if you can get the body to cope with it, and this is everybody, I'm talking about even people who have lost their gallbladder, whether it's through surgery or disease or whatever, the hepatic duct that goes to the gallbladder becomes a surrogate gallbladder. That's what happens. The liver is remarkable. So if you haven't got a gallbladder, that's not great, but it's not the end of the world, because you're still going to make bile and you'll still have some storage. You'll just lose that sort of muscular squeezing effect that the gallbladder used to do, which is beneficial. It would be better to be there, but it isn't. So when you're eating fats, you are helped by the food you're eating to produce bile. So I'm going to bore Jonathan here with the taurine remark, because protein breaks down in your stomach and it signals to the liver to produce bile, and taurine does that. So this is why it's a yin and yang thing. And if you've got good bile production, it helps with the absorption of amino acids. So it's a win-win. And so I think if you're just eating this way, and it's interesting that the two foods you found difficult were, streaky bacon and fatty steaks, especially grass-fed. That might be because of the density of it, or it could be because the supermarket meat you've been eating is injected with water. So it's easier to break down. I don't really know. But if you can improve your stomach acid naturally by having smaller meals with a bit more frequency, and just build up your natural stomach acid and also your bile, which is just by doing those two things, that's great. If you're impatient, then those are good suggestions of supplements, but I do think try it the more natural way first.
Yeah, I don't think you can patch up these things. I mean, speaking from experience, I had the same problems at one point. PPIs, using, what's called acid blockers, then using acidic things to help digest the food, make the enzymes activate at a certain pH in the gut. I tried all this stuff. It does work when you're using it, but long term you end up needing more because you don't fix the initial problem. So I definitely use the less abrasive approach first, just as Stephen has said. And everything you guys pretty much said is exactly what I said to him. So I'm glad there's not something else there, unless anyone else has any sort of 2 cents to chime in.
The only question is this individual had their gallbladder out? In which case, little and often might work better, but like Phil said.
Fair, yeah. That's the same sort of thing I'd probably think as well. Always use the least abrasive approach, in my opinion. Just so everyone knows that is watching this right now, we do go through the chat over, I believe, 4 different platforms of ours. So all the questions come up on our feed. So we are answering them in order of the way that they come up chronologically. So no one's deliberately being not answered. It's just we're going through each question as it comes through. So apologies if we don't get around to answering your question. Next question is from Landers, I believe, and it is: if you have no insulin response for long periods of time, is it detrimental to the pancreas when the glucose is low? I understand Stephen and Richard know a lot about this one. They probably word it a lot better than I can, but it's not a good idea to have absolutely low glucose in the blood or low insulin for too long, in my opinion. But what do you guys think?
Rich, do you want to go first? Because you've been quiet for a bit.
No, go on. You jump on.
I'll put the question back up. Sorry, I was being polite there. Typical English people. British, I should say, sorry. If your intake of fat is reasonable, your gallbladder contracts and releases bile. That's true. If you have no insulin response for long periods of time, is it detrimental to the pancreas when glucose is low? It depends how, firstly, and sorry to be picky here, no insulin response, because that's unlikely to ever happen. There is an insulin response. The problem with it is if it's inappropriate, if it's too much too soon. So, for instance, when you have refined carbohydrates, the pancreas has a biphasic response, and there's also incretin hormones to consider. So what happens when you've got the sweet taste? Your body will start to react, and your pancreas will start to try to release insulin granules. Now, the carbohydrates that we're eating that are refined, our body hasn't adapted to. So they go into the system a bit too quick. That's why you get this high spike in insulin, because you get a high spike of glucose and you get this huge response. If you're eating something like a fatty sort of piece of lamb, you'll get an insulin response, and you'll get approximately like a 3-hour insulin response from the amino acids and a 5-hour insulin response from the fat. I mean, today I was watching someone I really respect saying that fat does have no insulin response, and that's just not true. The body requires insulin. So thanks, Rich, for that earlier, saying how important it is. This thing about insulin suppression is absolute nonsense as well, because as soon as you eat something sugary, going back to what the original gang was saying, I missed the first question. If you ingest something toxic, your pancreas is not going to sit by and go, well, we haven't been working for the last couple of weeks. We'll just let that one slip by. That doesn't happen. And also your GI tract, which has a response to sugars, which is 10 times as great as the sweet taste and the entrance into your stomach. So once it gets into the small intestine, the K cells and the brush border in the first bend of the small intestine will signal to the pancreas to release insulin. And that's the increasing effect. And that's about 10 times what you would get from blood glucose. So that's not going to stop. That is not going to stop. I've done this experiment with clients that have been a bit gung-ho and really like all the data. I used to speak to a guy on Facebook who actually wore 2 CGMs and also did a finger prick and did this thing on Facebook every single day. And we were talking about eating a chocolate brownie because he hadn't had anything sweet for a long time. And we tried to guess what would happen. And virtually everyone in his Facebook group said his blood glucose is going to go sky high. Of course, it didn't. It actually plummeted because the insulin response was so effective and his insulin sensitivity was so good. So I would say that this no insulin response over long periods of time is fictitious, to be absolutely honest. The pancreas is there. It will be producing insulin. I think we need to turn it on its head. The pancreas is not designed to release lots of insulin all the time. It's going back to where it should have been. So I can't see how it'd be detrimental. I'm quite happy for the other guys to disagree, but I just feel this thing about insulin suppression and long-term low insulin is just ridiculous, because what you're saying by talking about that is we really want lots of insulin constantly being produced by the pancreas to keep it healthy, and that's not what happens. That's why you get late onset diabetes. Sorry, I'm really on a rant there, but that's my answer anyway. You get an insulin response from proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. You get it from fats and proteins. You get it over a longer period of time. You don't get a spike, and I think that's actually healthier than having a spike.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just to get to the point, like, you have glucose in your blood, insulin kind of matches that to deal with the glucose. What Stephen's talking about is a spike. When that goes above that limit, whatever that defined limit is, that's where the inflammation begins to happen. That's when the blood vessels can no longer deal with that amount of glucose in the blood. Your body's always trying to maintain an exact level of glucose in the blood at any given time. When you go above that from eating the wrong foods, high carbohydrate, high sugar diet, that's exactly what it's talking about. So I think it's spot on. Ben, what did you want to say, sorry?
No, I just thought Stephen nailed it, so nothing to add.
Excellent. We'll get to the next question then. We do have a super chat, and I did say I'd prioritise them. So here we go. And it's Ben asking, when you have the flu, how would you manage it? I throw everything under the sun at it, personally. So I use, at the moment I'm using BPC 157, Thymosin 4 alpha, about 100 milligrams of chelated zinc, vitamin D at 8,000 units, a B complex. I rest for as long as possible. I keep myself warm. I don't do anything stressful. I avoid difficult situations. That's it in a nutshell. So it is supplemental. I think the quickest way to probably get rid of it would be to probably dry fast. But right now I'm looking at a bodybuilding competition in June, on June the 2nd. So for me, deliberately trying to cut back on my food intake is not a great idea at the moment. I've got to be quite on top of it with my recovery at the moment. I don't think dry fasting for me would be a great recovery tool, but for anyone else it'd be an excellent tool. But Ben, what's your take on it?
Yeah, I'll go back to the old wives' tale. Feed a cold, starve a fever. With flu, fast, water fast if you want to, with electrolytes. Just rest and ride it out. Maybe vitamin C, maybe, like you say, zinc. But other than that, just take yourself to bed with a good book.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that really quickly. Just to add to that, fasting, I think, is probably the best protocol. When the body is susceptible to a pathogen, the body sequesters iron, so it pulls iron out of circulation because these pathogens thrive on iron. The problem with our lifestyle is everything we eat is high in iron. Fat, on the other hand, if you notice, if you were to test your cholesterol, you'll probably see a change in your cholesterol as the body's fighting a virus and infection off. So I'm all for fat, but it's difficult to get fat without protein in nature. So the best protocol for me, I always consume the electrolytes with water, but I think dry fasting is probably the best protocol. Fasting to some degree, if you are going to consume predominate fatty cuts, if you are going to get the fat from meat sources, and try to keep protein to a minimum. We need the protein, but again, protein comes with iron, and we want to keep iron low. So that will be my protocol.
And that's exactly what the body does. For people that wonder why you get high ferritin sometimes on this way of eating, ferritin locks up iron, and it's the body's defense. It's called an acute phase reactant. and bugs die because they can't get the iron. And I had this very question about 2 hours ago, and it comes up at least once a week because I do the phlebotomy side of things, that ferritin will go up. And I say, oh, you've had an infection, but you're so fit now, your body's fought it, and you've not even had a day off work. Sorry, you haven't got an excuse. You have to go to work tomorrow. And that's pretty good. That's what Rich just said. The question actually said, when you get the flu, what do you do? I don't get the flu. So I haven't had a visit to the doctor or a day off sick for about 10 years. And since I went low carb. So I think this way of eating gets you more robust. Doesn't mean you can't get sick, but I can't believe the difference, because I was a miserable specimen that every single year would be sniffling and snuffling and going to the GP in the winter to get antibiotics or some sort of remedy. And I think the best way to manage it is to not get it in the first place. Sorry to be really corny. So that's sort of like, make sure you can get some sunlight on your skin, even in the winter months. Eat properly, rest properly, don't have too much blue light. Here I am breaking that rule, obviously. And make yourself so robust.
You're not totally up to date on your flu jabs then, Stephen?
What? So you get flu, you mean? Right.
Yeah, I'd jump on that as well. It's when we become insulin resistant and I know that's a taboo topic in regards to how the body works, and insulin resistance doesn't really exist, but in the context as we understand it, when we suffer with insulin resistance, the body increases the amount of ACE2 receptors, or angiotensin converting enzyme 2 receptors. These are the type of things that allow us to contract certain viruses. One big one in particular in recent years. So being sick from excess carbohydrate or glucose consumption increases the volume of these receptors, which increases our chance of contracting said virus in the first place. The other issue with this insulin resistance is it hinders our natural killer cells' ability to fight off that virus and infection. So just by the consumption of carbohydrate or excess carbohydrate and being in that state of insulin resistance, not only does it open the door to us being more susceptible to contracting an illness, but it prevents the body from fighting it off quickly, which is why when, and you guys can probably attest to this as well, when you do become ill with something, it doesn't last very long. I have bouts. I had a migraine recently, which was the first for a while, which came as a shock. And I was telling Steve recently that I went out after a park run for a breakfast with my brother and my wife and his missus. And the young lady put milk in my coffee. And I haven't drunk milk for years and years and years. But the cafe was busy. I was too polite to tell her that she'd put it in there, and I didn't ask for it. So I drank it. And within 2 minutes, my vision started to go. So whether it's pure coincidence, but that's the only thing that I had changed that day, and I was ill for the rest of the day with the migraine. But going slightly off kilter there. But as you say, prevention is better than cure. Avoid carbohydrate, avoid this oxidative stress and electrophilic stress from the seed oils. Coming back to a point Phil said, that electrophilic stress, the xenophobic response from the seed oils is something that is alien to cells within the body. This is why the body tries to excrete it so readily. Stay away from the seed oils, the grains, and the carbohydrates, and you will be sick considerably less, and you will not need to fight off any flus. But if you do, I agree with you guys. Fast, dry fast, get fats in if you're going to eat, and try to avoid high quantity foods with iron for a few days at least.
Yeah, for a bit of context, Ben is very physically active. The gentleman that asked the question, extremely physically active. He has a very high carnivorous food intake. His diet intake is very, very good. His adherence is good. He has a very busy lifestyle. So some of these things don't really work out. He's probably doing about 30,000 steps a day. So the dry fasting might not be appropriate. But that's why I came across with the supplemental side first, just because I thought for him it'd be a bit more useful. The general public, I'd probably go more the other route that you guys recommended, of course. But yeah, good points all around, definitely. We've probably got time for maybe one, maybe 2 more questions. And Helen has asked this question, which is, help. This is day 15 of carnivore for me, and my migraines have subsided and my sugar cravings are gone. But these blasted heart palpitations, they bother me mostly at night and keep me awake. I've tried everything I can think of with balancing the sodium and the potassium and the magnesium and the water, and nothing seems to work. When I did the keto 7 years ago, I didn't even know what. I think there's more to it, but I can't see it. My first take would be, did you get rid of all dairy all at once? Sometimes that can be a problem. Okay, electrolytes were, and I never have had any problems with the heart palpitations. Okay, my first thought is the dairy. My second thought is, are your meals too small? Is your food intake too low? If that's accompanied with low blood pressure, that'd be my first thought. You need minerals in your body, as Richard would say, to do stuff to feel good. They're probably my two main things that I'd look at. So is your food intake too low? Is it that you've omitted too many foods all at once? Is that you're adapting too slowly? If you want to find a way to patch up a bit quicker, you can either use Richard's Keto Pro electrolytes, or you can use the Deuterium, which I mention a lot, an awful lot, because I think it's a really useful supplement to use, and it is an amino acid, a sulfuric acid, so it does fit into the carnivore diet. So yeah, what do you guys think?
Yeah, just to jump on that quickly, when people talk about balancing electrolytes, a lot of people are confused with what ratios these are. Potassium is way more important than sodium. Now, we're told that sodium is, the golden nugget when it comes to being ketogenic and carnivore, but it's the fact is that we need more potassium in nature. Nature supplies us with 4 times more potassium. So low potassium causes palpitations with the heart. So we need potassium, will calm the heart, and too much fat in the diet can distress the heart, which can speed up. And it could be because the gallbladder isn't efficient enough. But when you look at electrolytes, I think look at potassium in particular, and don't focus on the sodium. If you were supplementing with an electrolyte, you need something with a higher potassium ratio over excess sodium. But potassium, I think, is the key. If you increase potassium, at least that's going to calm the heart, and all of these other things will go away. At least if you need to supplement in the short term, you may be able to come away from that in a couple of weeks. But yeah, we're all individual. So it's, and Stephen and I had a bit of a row recently for talking too much about electrolytes. So I won't go on too much.
I was going to put in also, at night time, you see, when you start eating this way, your inflammation goes down and you become more aware of your heart rate. It's a real common thing. You could even think about what side of your body you're lying on, and see if lying on the other side will help you. The loss of visceral fat actually has a surprising influence on heart palpitations, because you've got some nerves that go up around the back of your heart, which at some point were insulated from those nerves. If you lose fat around those sort of areas, you could find that actually you're getting some palpitations from sort of the abdominal ventral pressure increasing, and you're having less fat around that area. So there's lots of different things that could be causing it actually. But yeah, we won't talk about supplements, will we, Rich?
For potassium, would you recommend like chelated potassium, or is like potassium chloride sufficient?
Citrate is the one I'd always recommend, because it's going to be the best compound for combating oxalate dumping, which could be another contributing factor. I know we get told calcium, but there's a big argument to go against excess calcium. Around 500 milligrams through diet and 700 milligrams through supplementations are shown to increase risk of cardiovascular disease massively. I know a lot of people will push the calcium, supplementation. It's fantastic in the short term, but a lot of carnivores still eat cheese, and raw dairy and eggs. It's surprisingly easy to get to 500 milligrams of calcium through a carnivore diet, unless you're strict carnivore, as in lion diet, only eating lamb and beef. Nature doesn't provide us typically with high calcium. An egg and milk, something that's born that gives life to something. The egg and milk itself to feed a newborn contains high calcium, which we need in the short term. But as we grow up, we don't consume milk from the mother's breast, and meat contains higher levels of potassium, about 4 to 1 with sodium, and then it's considerably less for magnesium, even less again for calcium. So that's why potassium citrate is the one that I would always opt for, because it'll bind to those oxalates and help combat any issues that they may be causing as well.
Yeah,
Excellent.
I definitely agree about the oxalate thing. And, you know, Sally Norton's pretty hot on that, isn't she, for getting them out of the body safely with the various citrates. But
Yeah, we
say I did years ago when I first went keto, probably like 2013, something like that. I got hospitalized. The palpitations were so bad, felt like ambulance and everything. I thought, right, I'm going to die. And what did it was those salt shots. You know, the sort of teaspoon of Himalayan salt in a little bit of warm water and swill it down, and then take a bit more water to take the taste away. But I do take Richard's point that, you know, balancing them all is the way to go. But if you're sitting there now with some palpitations, just give that a go, see what happens, because, you know, it might give relief straight away, and then, you know, look at the other electrolytes. But yeah, it blew me away. It actually took me a long time. I was mucking about with magnesium malate, which helped, but just kind of guessing 10 years ago or so. But then my son came in. He said, "Have you not figured it out yet?" And I'm like, "You just come back from climbing, you know, his forearms were tensing up, were cramping up." And he said, "I always take some salt and have a little salt shot, and it gets rid of the cramps." Okay. And it worked. And I've never had any issues since. And I don't do that anymore, but never had any issues since. It does balance out in time. And somebody said further up the chat that the Maasai don't have any salt. Well, of course, they drink blood, so they're getting quite a lot in from that. Anyway, but just a little point there.
Yeah, I appreciate all your takes on this, and obviously everyone here does have expertise in these sort of subjects, and we've had different experience of different people. You know, draw from it what you will. Try each one of our methodologies for yourself, see what works. Try the salt shots, try the potassium citrate, try the calcium. I'm not saying you have to have a lot of these things, just try one of them. And you might find, okay, one of them just worked, bang, straight away, job done. Problem solved. You know, then you can look to that in the future if you continue to have problems. But there's lots of avenues you can take for sure. But should we do one more question, guys, or is that it?
What's good about these things is that the dangerous quacks assembled here, the stuff that we suggest, it really doesn't do any harm, does it? Whereas if you go to the doctor, you're going to get all sorts of crazy stuff that goes right against the Hippocratic Oath. It's funny how people say how we do a load of harm. You know, it's these things that we suggest. They just, you know, they either work or they don't. They don't kill you.
That's the problem we have, guys. So if you ask us questions, remember, we're on a computer screen all in the UK. We can't test you. Well, Stephen can if you went to him, but that's the limitation we have. So we just spitballing here. We don't know exactly what's wrong with you. We can't diagnose. We can't prescribe anything. But these are just some safe methods you can try here and there and see what works for you. But do you guys want to do one more question, or should we wrap it up here? Yeah, Ben's good. Yep, all good. Okay, we'll do one more. So this is the next one that came up, which was just a quick one from... I've got to find her again now. Beth, which was, under desk elliptical or regular peddler. I'm 60, sedentary, overweight, and can use under the dining table higher than the desk. I don't know. What do you guys think? Ben, what do you think?
I'll jump in quick. It's just low intensity cardio, absolutely pointless. I think get up out of your chair every now and again. Do something involving heavy weights near the limit of your ability, and you'll get much more benefit in much less time.
Yeah, or if you're overweight, I find quite a good idea is to get one of those little rebounders, and you can actually kind of sprint on them. You know, you can sprint on the spot on them, and that's something you can do anytime. You sort of pass it and feel like it until I do it until a little bit of lactic acid appears in my legs, and then I think, right, that's enough, and then wander off, and it just kind of keeps things going. And I think that kind of exercise, short and intense, is much more useful than, you know, pedaling away under a desk, I would say anyway.
Yeah, I like the idea of just maintaining strength, bone density, building muscle if you happen to have lost it, you know, in your 60th year of being alive. I'm more of a fan of maybe isometric training. So that means you might just do a static hold. So it might be, perhaps you get in a push-up position, just hold it there for as long as you can, then lower yourself slowly when you can't hold yourself anymore. You can do a wall sit where you sort of bend with your knees, with your back against the wall, just hold that in a position. You do a few rounds of that, guys. Jobs are good and you're done. Your heart rate's going to be elevated. You're building your bone density. Your muscles can be stronger, and that's practical stuff you can actually use. You can actually use that. Okay, maybe you can't reach something in the cupboard. You know, I imagine you probably could if you're 60, but you know, perhaps something's low down. You're struggling to reach it. Your knees are sore. Well, that's going to make you stronger at that. So it's about building that longevity in terms of like your health span, I think. Anyway, but do either of you have a take on it?
Yeah, I've got a different take completely, actually. Just reading the question, if Beth is unable to move very much, the definition of intense is what is intense for Beth. So if getting out of the chair puts you out of breath, you know, it is sort of agreeing with what Ben's saying. Don't sit just pedaling away, because that's possibly being done because it's easy for you. You need to do something that's difficult because your body needs to have a training response, a physiological response, however you want to view it. You've got to do something that makes your body be a little bit compromised. And I'm not talking about losing your balance or doing anything that's dangerous for you. If you're overweight and you find getting out of a chair difficult, then that is your intense exercise. Get out of the chair. But if you normally do it just 4 times a day, do 8 over the day. Then the next day, do 10 over the day. And with this way of eating, what's going to happen is you're going to lose the excess weight, and those things become easier because you're lighter. So you have more joint mobility, and you can start to do more and more and more. Don't go online and look at people doing insane amounts of cardio or insane amounts of stuff in the gym. Just bear in mind that the only person you're competing against is yourself, and do something better every single day. So just going back to, I can't stress this enough. If you can only get out of a chair 4 times a day, then try and do it 5 times a day the next day. But log your progress. Don't be demoralized if you can't do it. But just by the end of the week, you will be doing at least 7 getting out of the chairs more, or whatever it is. Also, if you're at the desk, you know, some light weights, you could start just pumping your arms or something. Just get some resistance training into your upper body as well. I think, you know, I've been doing the personal training for about 15 years. So that sort of question does seem to be, yeah, but I can do this for 8 hours. I can pedal one, you know, for 8 hours. This is great. No, because if you can do any exercise for 8 hours, it's probably too easy. So I think that's the thing, Beth. If you can try and find something that challenges you a bit, but isn't dangerous for you, just do that, and then do more of it the next day and more of it the day after that, and try and get a little bit of progress in there. And I think if you keep eating this way, come back in a month and just say, yeah, I've lost this amount of weight, because you will if you eat this way. You definitely will if you come from the sort of standard American diet and you do this properly, and you will be able to function better.
For sure as well. And we also free up a lot more of your time. You know, pedaling away for hours was boring. It's not fun. You know, when you see, I mean, I know Richard does it, but he does it more competitively, so he gets a bit of a kill out of it, sort of thing. I don't enjoy it at all. I hate treadmills. I hate bikes. I hate ellipticals. I hate cross trainers. I don't like sitting anywhere for too long. I like to sort of keep moving, give my sort of mind something to do. But then again, you have to have a goalpost, like Stephen said. So, you know, intensity and difficulty is relative. But if you can measure something you're doing, it can be managed. So if I go to the gym and I perform my workout, whatever it is, like Stephen said, you try and exceed it the last time. Maybe you did that for 30 seconds, you know, with some pink dumbbells. Great, it's better than nothing. Then maybe next time you do it for 40 seconds. You know, the intensity has to increase to give it the body that physiological adaptive response. I think that's a really good point you just made there, Stephen. But yeah, we'll definitely set you straight, hopefully. Excellent. I think that's it for tonight, guys. So I just wanted Ben and Phil perhaps to remind us of the Big Fat Challenge events, which is you remind me, I'll put it on the screen now, but you talk about it, guys.
Go on, Phil.
I was going to go on to you. No, well, it's Tuesday today, isn't it? And so on Saturday, we have the War on Health Conference in the Peak District. And if you go to that link, or if you can't remember it, it's just waronhealth.uk. And you can book with the code all capitals GB Carnivore, or is it Carnivores?
GB Carnivore.
GB Carnivore, single, one word, no gaps, and you can get 30 quid off. But yeah, come along. There's carnivore food. See if you're going to book. See if you can do it by tomorrow, so we can give them the final numbers for the food. But great speakers: Natasha Campbell McBride, absolute hero of mine. Dr. Sarah Pugh, all the quantum stuff, light, water, magnetism. There's Dr. Rachel Brown with diet and connection with mental health. The carnivore shrink. She's great. And then there's Ben, and there's me, and
Ahmed.
and Ahmed Malik, of course, yeah, and he's going to be talking about all the horrors that have happened to him in the NHS, which is one of the main reasons why we're not recording it, because people are attacking Ahmed a lot and using everything he says against him at the moment. He's already lost his career for speaking out like a hero, but he's a hell of a character. And come and meet all these people, have some nice food, and everybody else has got all the sensible stuff covered. So I'm going to talk a load of bollocks in my talk. Got all sorts of weird things I'm going to talk about, but because I don't want to repeat what anybody else says, so I just talk stuff that is absolute nonsense.
Very good. Yeah, unfortunately, I won't be attending, but I would love to in the future. So keep your eyes peeled for that if I'm ever going one day. And just so you guys know, if you're in the US and you wanted to purchase Richard's electrolytes, get in touch with him through the website, find a way to email him, contact his page. He'll then find a way to ship it to you at a reasonable, fair sort of price. But I don't believe he's currently shipping things out through the website. You just have to contact him first in order to sort of arrange that. But that's one way you can go about it. And of course, reach out to all of us through socials. Sure.
Can I just say, a couple of people have asked, what does the liver flush entail? So I suggest maybe Phil, in his description on YouTube or whatever, puts the details of the liver flush or a link or something.
Yeah, I haven't got a link. I mean, it's mainly described in the book, The Amazing Liver and Gallbladder Flush by Andres Moritz, and he was brilliant on everything except diet, and I think that killed him early because he was very staunch on plant-based diet and low fat. But that's probably why he needed so many liver flushes, because most of the ones I did were back in the day when I was eating that kind of stuff.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, but we've adapted it to a carnivore thing. I don't know how to get it to anybody. I mean, if anybody emails me, you can find out how to do that through my my website or my YouTube channel, and you can find a link, and I'll send you our little protocol of it, and how you actually do it. But it's too much to explain on air right now, I think, all the ins and outs of it. But yeah, happy to send you something.
Excellent. You get to go away with a little goodie bag after watching us, so that's good to hear. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. We'll be here next Tuesday at 7 p.m. UK time. And thank you all for the panelists for joining tonight. Appreciate you coming on and giving up your Tuesday evening to answer some questions from people perhaps all over the world. So excellent. And end that there, guys. So cheers. Bye-bye.